We're going to find out if that's working.
As a parent, what would be your reaction if Wake County came back and said, hey, we threw something together at first really quickly because we had to get something up in front of you, but now that we've had some time to work the kinks out, we'd like to transition to this model, which we think will be better. Would you welcome that with open arms, or would you be very mad about things changing?
I would welcome, as long as it's a coordinated front, as long as they're saying, we are doing this as an organization and we have a plan and the plan has been thought through and where the teachers are on board and everybody else is kind of okay with it. Sure. You guys are the instructional experts. I'm going to follow your lead. Yeah. And I'll do whatever I can to help. We had some instruction, some loose instruction before spring break, which was before the more formal stuff. And it was a lot more disorganized, and they made a lot of changes since then, and the changes are all positive. And so I would welcome similar, we're going to refine this, and this isn't working for us, but this other piece is working for us. So we're going to move in that direction or whatever.
You guys definitely need to take the pre-show banter course. It's supposed to be light and frothy.
Yeah, sorry about that. These days, light and frothy is not easily found. But
how's the mask making going?
Yeah. Actually, this was not my mask. A friend of mine made this for me. She's a much better sewist than I am, which I've discovered is the gender neutral term. The machine behind me was for making a hammock. My daughter and I, who is 8, decided to make my wife a hammock for Mother's Day, but we finished it on Friday, and we decided that we weren't going to wait until Mother's Day. It's beautiful weather outside, so we just went ahead and gave it to her. And
that's so nice.
Yeah.
Happy early Mother's Day in a time of weirdness.
Exactly. And the weather has been phenomenal for hammocking, so hey.
It was cold this morning, and then it got hot.
Well, it rained last night. So I'm glad I wasn't sleeping outside last night. But
Yep. There's some folks that string up a hammock along the Cary Greenway. Every time I've been out there walking, they've been doing that. So they just go out there, string their hammock, lie in it all day.
Yeah, I got the hammock book a couple of years ago, and I've fallen in love with it. I think it's the best way to camp. It's the best way to relax outside. It's just great. So
I still don't have my hammock easily accessible because I meant to just pull it out and be like, "Here's mine," but I don't even know where it is.
Okay, the counter has hit 0. We are officially on the air, and
oh no. I'm still not visible. Well,
still no picture from Jen.
That's fine.
It may never arrive. We don't know.
That's fine. Save me from having to go to the hairdresser.
Breandan is seeing Jen's picture on his Skype.
Works for me.
And I guess I never tried closing my Skype and starting it again. There were some troubleshooting techniques that I should have followed in the time we had available, but I didn't. So we're just making Jen invisible. However,
that's fine.
We do have a start. We have a start to the show. You got roots.
I got roots.
Yes.
My dyed hair has roots.
I was seeing a story on that on CBS Sunday Morning that the reporter actually admitted that, this was not one of the more important things that they had to deal with in this crisis, but it was still a thing. So they were doing it. Anyway,
yes,
we
definitely
have
first world problems.
Yeah, we have a show opening, and it includes you guys, and we have rehearsed this once. Let's see how badly we can mangle it. Are you ready?
Born ready.
Let's do it.
Here we go. From the studio in the bonus room above the garage on the north side of Cary at the foot of Mount Belzoni, this is the Triangle Talk Show. Okay, hey everybody, I am Gary Pierce.
And from the Yellow Room, on the border of Carborough in the People's Republic of Chapel Hill, sequestered at the foot of Mount Okanichi, and on the side of the hill with the chapel up top, I'm Nanny Jen, host of NannyCast.
And from a converted attic apartment on the edge of downtown Cary, nowhere near any mountain I know of, I'm Breandan Diesendorf, the host of the Practical Operations Podcast.
And that went better than I thought it would, and it just about filled up the music properly. All right. Before we start the show, I got to ask about the Orange County Mountains, because I was thinking that there's an ancient mountain range in Orange County because you got mountains all over the place. If you look at Google Maps and do Google Map search and just stick in mountains, and they'll pop up everywhere, Okanichi and a whole bunch of others. And so I wanted to find out if there were really mountains there, and there's not. But Jen, you claim there is.
Yeah, well, Mount Okanichi technically classifies because mountain is defined as something with an elevation of a particular number or above, and Mount Okanichi just barely squeaks over that elevation. So
867 feet above sea level.
Yeah.
And the highest point in the triangle.
And I've hiked it. I've hiked it a bunch because it's a park.
Imagine it's gorgeous.
You get to the top, though, and the top is roped off because they use it for transmission of important data and things.
Yeah. Any high elevation spot has got a cell tower, a broadcast tower, some kind of radio tower or a cell phone tower, and a water tower or a water tank. One or more of those things. Yeah. So TripAdvisor says that in geological terms, TripAdvisor says that that Okanichi is hardly a mountain. It's 600.
I mean, it is. It's a mountain by technicality alone.
Now, something called the Carolina Outdoors Guide says in geological terms, Okanichi Mountain is a monadnock. A mountain could be a mountain or area of greater elevation that has resisted erosion and stands isolated in an essentially level area, and that's according to ncgeology.com. I'm not sure what to say about that, but as a mountain, you're thinking that it's maybe it started volcanic and blew up like Hawaii, or plates banging into each other like the Rockies. But this just says it resisted erosion. It's whatever the material is didn't erode with everything else. So I don't know. There's something in a geocaching site that says it was volcanoes there 600 million years ago. So maybe there's something to the volcanoes thing.
And the Appalachians are really, really old as compared to the Rockies or other mountain ranges in this country. So they've had a much longer time to wear down and erode.
Yeah. But we're a long way from the Appalachians. This is Orange County. It's not even, I guess the Urari Forest, that's even older mountain range.
Geologically speaking, they're not that far away from the Appalachians.
Okay.
It's only about 2.5 hour drive up to Boone.
Yeah. Well, but it doesn't really, we don't see foothills and stuff until you get, past west of Winston-Salem.
He says to Jen, who is on the side of a hill in a city named after the hill that she's on the side of. Hey, but sure, we don't see foothills.
I grew up in the Chicago suburbs next to Mount Prospect and Arlington Heights, and they were as flat as a pancake. So town names don't mean anything.
Well, we've got a hill.
Okay.
And it'll test your cardiovascular system. And up at the top, it has what used to be a chapel, but is now a hotel. The Carolina Inn used to be the eponymous chapel of Chapel Hill.
Okay. So they need to change it to Chapel Hotel. No, Hotel Hill.
Either way works, actually.
Probably not going to do that. Jen, you're scratching your microphone against something.
I will stop that.
It's going to drive, it doesn't bother me, but it's going to drive the audience crazy. Okay, so it's time to introduce the episode, I guess. The episode title, episode 86. It's a very random episode for April 26, 2020. The Terrible Twos. I like naming episodes that really don't mean anything, or you really have to scratch your head to guess what they might be about. No one is going to guess unless they've been following the show from the beginning. April 26th is exactly 2 years since episode 1 of the Triangle Talk Show. So that makes this our second anniversary, the beginning of our third year. That is way beyond what most podcasts make. I think the average podcast length history goes to about 7 episodes or so, and then that's when they fade out. So I recorded episode 1 back on April 28th, 2018. Technically, there was an episode 0 and a couple of other tests. And if you go to the YouTube channel for the Triangle Talk Show, which, by the way, is still not youtube.com/Triangle Talk Show, because we're at 75 subscribers and we need to get to 100. And if we get to 100, then I can get a custom URL. So please subscribe on YouTube, whether you're ever going to watch the show or not. Just go there and subscribe and help me get to 100. So if you go to the YouTube channel, there's a couple of tests, and episode 0 and some things that were just me trying to figure out the technology and get it going. I didn't put them on the website. They're just episode 1, April 25th or 26th is the official one. I was going to say that I had a notion of doing this after the Women's March. I thought about doing this after the Women's March, the day after Trump's inauguration. We are all, those of us on this side of politics, very depressed about the election.
That was not a fun day.
And the inauguration didn't help anything at all. And then, to me, clearly this was not out of the blue because it had been planned, but to me, pretty much out of the blue, as far as I recall. The next day, there was this women's march, thousands and thousands of women marching on Washington and in Raleigh and in other places around the country, that just lifted my spirits like crazy.
I was there. I was in D.C. for it.
Okay, you must have stories.
Yeah, I had never been to a march before, and I have to say that my expectations were not met. I expected a lot more anger and a lot more marching, and it was much, much more like attending a concert or a rally.
It was fun.
So I expressed concern and curiosity because I went loosely coupled with a group that was up there. And so I was standing near somebody who was an organizer behind Rise NC. That's what the group has ultimately turned into, is Rise NC, and it's on Facebook. And she explained to me that marches are used as recruitment centers for actual activism that takes place later. So they expect about 20% of the people at the march would sign up to be active, dog's body activists. And so the march was really to tell people, go here, click this, submit your information to that place, sign up here. And less about getting the attention of policymakers at that moment.
Interesting, because I've been volunteering with the Women's March for not the first year, and the one in Raleigh, but the second year and the third year. And that's, as a concept, I never caught that. It certainly could have happened, but not something that caught my attention. Was it overwhelming? Was it huge?
Oh, it was enormous. And we didn't get started marching, despite what the schedule said. We didn't get started walking for, I think 2 hours after the beginning of the line started walking. So that just tells you how many people there were that had to all start moving. It's like traffic. The first car can leave, but the last car in line stays stopped for a little while. And yeah, we weren't even at the back. We were about somewhere in the middle. And definitely good for those with bladder control. There were bathrooms, but you had to get to them, and that was a challenge.
I did the education march, I think last year or the year before, the Red for Ed marches, and there was actually a lot more walking than I thought there would be. They walked around the Capitol in Raleigh, and I thought that was a rather interesting thing. And I didn't pick up on the fact that it's activism recruitment. I thought it was more of a show support and get the news cycle invested to get the legislature to either wave off on their actions or to change their course. So that is interesting to learn as well. I have friends who are in the activism side of things, who are in lobbyist groups and whatnot, looking for workplace equality, for parental leave and those kinds of things. Moms Rising is one of the groups that my friends are involved in, but I don't have a lot of free time to spend downtown or other places, so I haven't generally been doing that stuff.
I grew up, my father was a staffer for the North Carolina General Assembly. So I grew up around the General Assembly, being able to just waltz into legislators' offices because I was that cute kid that, had been there forever. And so being able to make points and just go lobby legislators directly. And I guess that shaped my idea of what was going to happen. I thought that on the stage, people were going to call out legislators specifically and say, hey, we were in your office such and such a time, and you said that you would make this promise, but we have seen nothing on it. Let's get on it, get on it, son. But it didn't. It was people saying, I mean, they were talking about issues that needed to be talked about. And then at the end, they were saying, call this number right now. It's the congressional switchboard, and you can go ahead and talk, they'll put you through to your senator or your representative right now. It was definite calls to action for activism and less about marching and shaming.
Okay. I've always heard that handwritten letters are the most effective thing because it demonstrates to the politician or the staffers or whoever's opening the mail that there's actually a human being who bothered to do this thing and put a stamp on it, rather than somebody who called the switchboard or somebody who, rallied Reddit to come and do a thing. But I've never heard if that's actually true. I mean, that's just one of those things that you hear kind of through the political spheres. But do you have any feedback on that?
My brother, who worked for a U.S. politician as an intern in his office, and I guess we'll go ahead and name and shame. It was David Price, worked for Price in his congressional office, his local one in Raleigh, said that the most effective happened to be the faxes. If you faxed a letter in, or I suppose a written letter would work too, but he said what happened is they would take the fax papers off the fax machine and put them in stacks according to how you felt on things. And it created a visual bar graph for the politician to go and look. And he said that was much more effective than little tally marks on the whiteboard, which was the other way they were recording constituent feedback on various policy issues. He said that at least for Price, the visual bar graph of this stack of papers is taller than that stack of papers was very effective.
I may have to get a phone line and a fax machine.
You can get them online and send a PDF or a document to services, and they'll send it out as a fax. It's kind of sad. Well, I guess mailing letters is an older technology than faxes are. But it's kind of sad that fax is even a thing anymore. And I think there's a problem with mailing letters because these days, and since 9/11, for over almost 20 years, the mail goes to a sorting place that checks it for anthrax and ricin and bad stuff in the mail. And it takes a long time before it actually gets to the congressional offices. So the faxes will get...
Yeah. I'm guessing that's why you recommended faxes, because they go through a little faster. But I found that a precocious 12-year-old young white girl is very, very effective at getting policy changed.
Yeah, I have a friend who has brought her children into various people's offices, both locally and in D.C., as she's part of Moms Rising. And so she's looking for advocacy for parental rights and those kinds of things. And having a child with you does help a lot. So,
Jen, you were saying that even though you've been at the legislature a lot, the Women's March was the first activist thing that you participated in? The
first march, the first coordinated activity where it wasn't me setting the policy discussion points. Yeah. Because I've walked in speaking of myself and for myself on things that I thought were idiotic and stupid. And I have no problem walking into the office of somebody who, used to like be sort of that faux uncle to me when I was a kid and going, "You're being stupid right now. Stop it." And it's like I said, I found it effective, but this was the first time I've been somewhere where I got to see other people setting policy. And it was very interesting how unfocused it was. Because when I would set policy, I would say, today I'm going to talk to them about this topic particularly. And the Women's March seemed to be a smorgasbord. And I thought it demonstrated, which I later learned was because of the audience and because they were trying to recruit for the audience, not because they were trying to talk to politicians. Politicians don't want to hear a smorgasbord. They want to hear one thing at a time that they can act on one at a time.
Yeah, the Raleigh Women's March has a statement of principles that is paragraphs long and always seemed to me like, trying to please every possible constituency that's going into it. And what you're saying about, well, that's why they do it, because they want to please every possible constituency that's going to be involved.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't present that to a politician and try to get any action done on it.
Now, on Tuesday, you walk in and you talk about paid parental leave. On Wednesday, you walk in and you talk about the fact that fathers are also parents. Hey, did you notice? On Thursday, you walk in, you have to spread it out one at a time for politicians.
Breandan, have you ever done any marching or political activism?
Apart from doing the education march the other year, I've not done a lot of direct stuff. When I was living overseas, we were not encouraged to participate in the political system because it wasn't our country, and they had consent of the governed, but we were not the governed. We were, imported workers.
So we were not.
Yeah, we were not considered to have valid opinions on anything. And since we got back, I've been busy trying to do the whole, I'm going to work and let my wife be a stay-at-home mom. That was the decision. We came to that decision together, and that left her with the free time to make the political connections. And she has friends who are in politics, and we lived in Chapel Hill for a while, and I think that helps inform where our politics land.
And now I know how close to the train tracks you are.
Oh yeah, when I say I'm downtown Cary, I'm not kidding. And
I think I've decided what you're at the foot of.
The foot of the Cary train station.
Yep.
I mean, it's a couple thousand feet from here, but not more.
Wake you up at night?
No, I mean, unless literally I'm in the office, I don't hear it anymore. I've filtered it out completely in my head.
All right, I interrupted
anyway,
you.
So I haven't done a lot of direct political stuff myself. I support all these causes, and I write checks to various organizations that I think are worthy and need my support. But in terms of me, like physically going and doing things, that hasn't been a high enough priority in my life. And I think that is probably to the detriment of myself and society. So that's one of those things that needs to change.
Yeah, I had not done any of those things. At one time back in, I think, 1987, I was living in Knoxville briefly, and there was something going on, and I'm thinking it was ERA, but it seems a little bit late for ERA. But it was something along those lines, and I went and I actually got myself on TV saying something really stupid. And the folks the company I just started working for, they did not appreciate it. It didn't last there very long. But in any case, it was. I was thinking that it was after watching on TV the Women's March in Washington after Trump's inauguration that I got the idea of doing this Triangle Talk Show, but that's not true, because I looked up the date that I registered the triangletalkshow.com domain, and that was January 10th, 2017. It'll be a couple of weeks before the inauguration, so I must have been thinking about it before that. Maybe the Women's March spurred me to do more, but I didn't do much more for about a year, because I had already been doing that ham radio show for almost 6 years at that point. And I couldn't do two different shows. I didn't want to do both of them at the same time, so I had to end the ham radio show. It had been moderately successful. It was doing something I thought was useful, and it was actually making some money. So I shifted it over to my co-host, a fella in California. He had joined me the year before, and I completed that handoff early in 2018. So it took me about a year to get that done. Nobody accuses me of doing anything fast. The anniversary of the inauguration and the Women's March goes on by. No Triangle Talk Show. I attended that Women's March in 2018 very briefly. I just went downtown. First activist thing that I'd done in the Raleigh area, and I'd been here almost 30 years at that point. So I went downtown just to see what it was like, and I walked around and saw, this is impressive. It was pretty big. What finally got me moving, though, was the midterm election. I was going to be on the first Tuesday in May, and I wasn't prepared for the election. I didn't know most of the candidates. I didn't know anything down ballot. So I did some research, and that research became the foundation of episode 0. And so it was a review of what I had learned about, mostly, I called it the little picture, mostly my precinct and my district, because I couldn't cover the whole triangle. But
People forget how important those local elections really are and how much of policy they drive, especially at the town municipality and the county level, that we get caught up in the national elections. But spending the time to look at who's running, what their policies are, shapes how education works. It shapes how municipal services, it shapes zoning laws, it shapes all kinds of other pieces. So this is my plea to everybody. Don't skip the midterm elections. Don't skip the yearly elections. Whenever there's a small election, they're often decided by hundreds of votes. So if you want to have a voice, that's a good place to do it.
Or, you can let me decide. I mean, I'll do it. I always vote in all of those. And I mean, I'm perfectly happy being your benevolent dictator.
Yeah, because you're
setting policy for you.
Those few of us that do some research and do the voting, it's hard to learn very much about that. The News and Observer doesn't go that deep. A few other websites help out. League of Women Voters has some information, but they don't tell you. They don't make recommendations. They just provide information that's been provided to them by the candidates themselves.
And I want to say in Cary, like my town council voting whatever region, there's usually 5,000 people who vote in the election, which is astronomically small. Like that's nothing. So it'd be relatively easy to push those elections if you really had an agenda you felt strongly about. So if you care about these things, people, vote. Do a little bit of reading. Spend 20 minutes doing the reading. Get to work a little late that morning or whatever, and vote.
Or, in light of COVID, request an absentee ballot, because North Carolina has an absentee ballot process where you don't have to have a valid excuse. You get one because you asked for one.
Right. No, I think they call it no excuse or no fault voting.
Yeah.
And that's going to be an interesting thing come November. And
I hope we have elections in November.
Yeah, we'll do some shows about that a little bit later on this year as it's getting closer. But early enough, you could request an absentee ballot today if you wanted to, is what I've heard. And I think that's going to be a much bigger deal. So that's how this podcast got started. I've been podcasting since 2012. So not since the beginning of podcasting. That podcasting itself was started in about 2004. But I've been doing it for a while. I got up to 400 episodes of the Ham Radio Show, and we're 86 on this one, so not doing too bad. I am curious how you two guys, you both do podcasts. How did you get them started? Jen, go ahead.
I got started because I switched careers. I was a public school educator. I taught high school science, and I switched over into nannying. Not to say bad things about the way we compensate our public school educators, but because the money was better. And I was used to, when you're a teacher, you get a mentor. You do your student teaching, but then when you get hired by a district, you continue to have a mentor for about 3 years. You go through a mentorship program, and there's always somebody there to help you out with that onboarding and those early steps. And so I switched careers into nannying, and there was nothing, nobody and nothing. And I wasn't going to stand for that. So I went and found myself a mentor and recorded our mentorship sessions and told her we were going to make this into a podcast for anybody else who desperately needed a mentor. And we opened up a feedback line so that we could take other people's problems on if I didn't have a particular problem that week. And thus NannyCast was born. And it continues to serve as that initial mentorship for new entrants into the nannying world.
You know a lot of things. You're content as a short time that I have known you. You continue to surprise and impress me about how many things you got experience doing. But this wasn't in your background at all, was it?
No. I'd worked with children a lot, but never as a nanny and never in a parenting setting. Because nannies do a lot of the same sort of parenting activities that parents do in terms of what do you do when the kid won't eat the lunch you put in front of them or other things like that. And so I had those questions and I didn't want to get it wrong. I didn't have the luxury of being a parent who nobody's paying you, so nobody can fire you if you got it wrong. I had an employer who might kick me to the curb if I got it wrong. So I needed to know what the right answer was, and I needed it yesterminute. So that's why I hunted down a mentor.
Well, that is interesting, but that's not what I was asking about. It's the podcasting part that you didn't have any experience. Well, okay, you didn't have experience with either one, but you had no experience podcasting either, I don't think.
No, and this was early enough on that not many people had experience podcasting. So I just took a audio recorder and literally plunked it down, and we got the audio we got, and we got listeners who would listen to it because I read somewhere on, I think it was the podcasting subreddit, somebody said that they would listen to the crappiest audio in the world if it was the only source of that information or if the story was compelling. And we were the only source of that information. So
when did you guys start recording?
We started recording in 2012.
Okay, so relatively early as well in the podcasting scene.
Yep.
And at 2012, a lot of people were thinking about getting into podcasting. It wasn't something that the general public was very tuned into. But if you had something that you wanted to get information out on, you could learn about it. But it was still hard to do. I mean, as a technology is not hard. If anybody wants to start a podcast, I can tell them how in about 15 minutes. But that's 15 minutes different than where most people start. And they're going, how do I do this? How did you learn the technology?
Well, I had been listening to podcasts since 2004, and I have verifiable records of that because I was never somebody who liked music. I always liked talk radio. I loved NPR's shows and so on and so forth. So long before the iPod was really a thing, I had some sort of device that could play MP3s. I think it might have been my computer. And I would just download these MP3 files from people. There wasn't even an RSS feed back then. People would just put up MP3 files of like their podcast shows on their website. And you would have to know to go check every week to download the new one. And so I was listening to them for a while, and I thought it was a great way to get information out to the general public with a lower file size than doing it on video.
Who was there to listen to back then?
I want to say my internet friend. I've never met him a day in my life, but we are as friends as you can get without ever having shared meet space with one another. Adam, who now works at Google, I think he had a podcast, and I'm putting that in air quotes because there was no RSS feed with it, called the Smilecast back then.
Okay.
And it was about non-toxic positivity. And I really enjoyed that when I was in college because I needed something to get me through stress that wasn't that toxic positivity where people are like, everything's fine, only think happy thoughts. Bad thoughts are banished. You know, that it acknowledged that, yes, frustration happens, but in 10 years, you'll still be here. So the frustration is obviously not the end of the world and things like that. And I found that very helpful. But it is long, long gone, that podcast by now. 2004
is about the time when Adam Curry, who is acknowledged as the inventor of podcasting, sort of, started doing shows. So, I mean, you were way back at the very beginning. I gave my wife an MP3 player for a birthday present, I think, one time. And I don't think she's ever used it. I mean, it had like 250 megabytes of storage. So, you know, today it would be useless, but I don't think she ever played it. She got an iPhone. Or no, she got an iPod. I think she started with an iPod before the iPhone. And she just used it for music. She didn't listen to any podcasts. She listens to a few now. I knew nothing about podcasting until 2011 when I was recruited to do one of the shows on the TWiT network, the This Week in Tech network, a ham radio show.
I remember it well.
Yeah, and I had made DVDs and I was familiar with YouTube, and I thought, because I was doing video, I was thinking, you know, YouTube, not good enough quality for the stuff that I'm producing. I'm going to put mine on DVDs and sell them. And then I came across this TWiT thing and discovered podcasting and kind of pivoted. Breandan, how long you guys been doing it, and what led you this direction? You got a technology background, of course, so you're kind of custom.
Yeah, so we started recording in November of 2015, so a little later than you guys did. But we had been kind of kicking around the ideas, me and some of my coworkers, of getting better at public speaking, getting better at self-promotion. A lot of those things you need to be able to do to either talk at a conference or interview well or just make your points clearly in meetings, are pacing yourself, having an organized set of thoughts. And we thought, okay, well, instead of getting into a super political podcast in the beginning or something that's super opinionated that people are going to jump down our throats, we're going to stick to really pragmatic, work-related topics, which we knew was going to limit kind of the breadth of our podcast in terms of who's going to want to listen to it. But there's a lot of folks who are joining our profession and there isn't really a manual or a training class or a degree you can get in what we do. And so we figured, hey, we would just sort of start covering basics. And if we ran out of ideas, we'd end the podcast. And we are at 90 episodes over the course of the last 4 years. We have taken a couple of 2 and 3 month breaks due to illness and travel and other things that were unavoidable. But we got back on a pretty good clip. And listenership is steadily and slowly growing, which is always a good thing. We never get into this for the money, and for us, the hosting costs, because we know all the tech side of this. I mean, it's just an RSS feed and some audio files on a server somewhere. Our hosting costs are...
Do you host your own?
Yeah, it's like 12 cents a month. It's basically nothing. And then, I want to say that the domain registration is $90 a month or $90 a year for the .fm domains.
Yeah, .fm is expensive. .com's like $13.
But that is the total of our real costs there. We have picked up a sponsor just in the sense that we don't want to be paying the domain registrations ourselves, and they're looking for promotion of their stuff. And some of us work for that company. And so we're like, okay, yeah, we're happy to do an ad read and send visitors your way. But I still enjoy it mostly in the sense of covering interesting topics and practicing speaking. I've always had a problem speaking too fast in my life. And I find that being on a microphone oddly makes me slow down and think about my words a lot better. So it helps. We recently interviewed a former boss of mine who works at LinkedIn now, who's the global end user manager he's the senior manager of global end user services. And he was helping coordinate LinkedIn's shift from a primarily like in-office workforce to a primarily working from home workforce. And their problems are things like, we have to find monitors to ship to people's houses. We got to find desks. We got to figure out policies for these things. We got to, all of these other kind of logistical and human challenges that for a very large organization to, from 1 week, I think it was over a 2-week period, they went from kind of business as usual to, and everybody's working from home. So we published that Friday morning.
Fighting with everybody else for the resources to do that.
Oh yeah, he described it as a global procurement hide and seek.
Yeah, you can't buy a webcam today, I don't think.
Still not. They're still basically unobtainium.
Well, it's apparently been successful because you make a very good presence on this show.
Well, thank you.
And both of your shows are what everybody says a podcast should be, which is a narrow niche to be successful. A narrow niche and focused on one thing. This program's niche is geographic rather than topical. So, I'm just aiming at folks in the triangle. If you happen to be tuned in from Thailand someplace, well, we're on the internet, you can get us. But we're not talking to you. And by the way, for YouTube, we're not talking to kids. No kids. YouTube's got a thing about doing shows for kids. If you claim to do a show for a kid, you got a lot of restrictions. So we're not doing shows for kids.
And I find for me the hardest part about podcasting is the aggressive self-promotion of the episodes themselves on, Facebook and LinkedIn and Reddit and wherever else you'd go post them. Because it feels kind of slimy to me to be posting them, but that's also how you spread the word. Because word of mouth only goes so far amongst your immediate friends and family. And so looking at the download stats, we've got people in all parts of the country. We've got people in Europe and a couple of folks in Asia. And some of them I'm sure is from when I lived overseas, and I have friends who are still overseas, but it's hard to tell. So you don't get a lot of feedback.
Yeah. The show I did before, typical episodes, we got a few thousand people watching on YouTube and a 1,000 or so audio downloads. The biggest ones got into the 30s and 40,000s. But for the most part, and I didn't consider that to be successful enough to keep on going. The triangle
by every metric, mine is not successful.
Yeah.
We have a couple hundred listeners on a regular basis, but that's not enough to hit real advertising numbers or any of the hallmarks of success. But that's not why we're doing it.
Yeah, and this show, a recent episode hit up about 100 viewers on YouTube. The thing to don't go do is to go see how long someone watches or listens to the show, what they call the audience retention on YouTube. That will depress you.
I don't have access to those stats because we don't do a visual portion to our podcast. We have kept it where we started, audio only.
Yeah. Yeah, and the podcast industry is working on a way to get feedback from people who download, and it would take a podcast app and a listener that is willing to send feedback back, pretty intrusive about how much they've actually listened to something.
In some ways, I'm really glad that Apple has taken kind of a stand of silence on that, because they still represent the largest single player app share for podcasts. And they have no intention or no desire that they've expressed to expand those kinds of tracking metrics. And I kind of like that. I don't want my podcast habits to be analyzed and tracked and poured over by people who are trying to maximize retention. And no, I listen to the shows that I like because I like them and not because I've been engaged by Facebook.
Yeah. And I do the show that I like to do, the way I want to do it. The way I figure we're just keeping folks company here. There's people out there that are, if they're listening to this show, it's just because they like listening to us. We could be talking about anything, and they like listening to us. That's the way I look at it and do the show. That I do a show for me. I do something that I enjoy doing, and I'm glad you guys are having a good time coming around. You've come around more than once, so you must be enjoying doing the Triangle Talk Show, doing something that gets you out of the niche.
Yeah, and if I wasn't enjoying it, I wouldn't be here.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about reopening North Carolina. We saw, since the last time we did a show, we saw their Tuesday march on downtown with their lack of social distancing and their basic chest thumping. And I guess they're going to plan another one coming up this Tuesday. Be interesting to see if the state grows some spine about what they're going to permit, because Wake County doesn't permit gatherings of more than 10 people. The state, which does not override local jurisdictions and doesn't try to, apparently did for these guys, and the county just didn't do anything about it, and the city didn't do anything about it. They just let them go. I guess they didn't want to create a stand, but be curious to see what they do this time, because they're coming back.
I mean, we could go out ahead of time and sort of troll them by taping X's to the ground that are all 6 feet apart from one another and giving them some. I really, it drives me bonkers when people claim that they can be responsible while simultaneously, as they're saying it, are not being responsible. Drives me bananas, because you have proved that what you're saying is a lie in your very actions at this moment. So maybe, and I get it, because it's hard for people to judge distance. Maybe they need to tape X's down. Maybe that would help.
Yeah. And for me, there's the line here is dangerous when you have to be careful with. Part of this country is founded on the idea of the First Amendment, the right of the people to peaceably assemble and petition the government for redress of grievances. That is really a sacred part of this society. However, on the other side, there's a power just blipped. We'll see if I stay on.
Didn't blip you on your output. You must have you must have a UPS.
I do. But I heard the transformer go. But on the other side, we have laws against yelling fire in a crowded theater because there's public health things. And so you have to balance the two, and you have to find a way to make reasonable accommodations between them. This is not I have the right to free speech or death or whatever. But on the other side, if you go and you meet in groups and you spread COVID to lots of other people, and now there's an upsurge in hospitalizations and emergency rooms, and then people who couldn't, somebody who broke their leg or fell off a ladder working on their roof, needs medical attention desperately, you're denying them that. And so at what point do we balance that? And I generally tend to the side of we shouldn't be having these protests, but that also speaks to my political leanings. And so it's hard for me to disambiguate the two.
Say my experience with going to protests, which has proved every single time to be more of a party and less of a actual political action, just says protests are kind of useless. I mean, they're good in terms of you feel like you found your community, so I guess that's good, but otherwise they're really pointless in terms of swaying a politician. Like walking into their office and sitting down with them, now that'll sway a politician maybe. But standing outside with a sign and honking your horn and going, woo, doesn't really accomplish much.
Yeah, and the people who I'm really upset with, I think it was Michigan. There was some protesters who were driving their cars out en masse and then basically just causing a gridlock on purpose. And in at least one of the videos, you can see an ambulance that can't get through the crowd of cars. And it's like, guys, you're exactly the problem. Like you are now demonstrating that you are both the cause and the root of the problem. Stop doing this kind of ridiculousness.
So the phrase or the concept that I'm trying to promote is that, we have the right to peaceably assemble. That if your mere presence, just standing there breathing, can cause someone to catch an illness that is potentially lethal. In a crowd, that potential is amplified. That's not a peaceable assembly. That's a violent assembly. So
we also have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Yeah. So,
but Jen, you were saying that you didn't think that their presence was going to influence politicians, but politicians are going to be watching TV too.
Yeah, but politicians are not as dumb as we give them credit for. Politicians didn't become politicians without the ability to listen to experts, and the North Carolina General Assembly and the governor's office have subject matter experts there, and they are listening to their subject matter experts, which is, again, one of the roles my father filled. They're non-political staff. They are just there to be the brain trust of the state, and the politicians know to listen to them. They know how to parse complicated policy. These politicians are not dumb enough to go, well, Bob says he needs to get back to work because he needs a haircut. You know, they can weigh and balance these things. And you saw it with Governor Cooper. Governor Cooper promptly came out and said, listen, I've heard what you have to say, but no, what we're going to do is we're going to go on a 2-week reevaluation cycle. And the first 2-week reevaluation cycle is over May 8th, and I guarantee you he will reevaluate and find, nope, we still need to stay shut down for another 2 weeks. And that's sensible policy. That's not them winning because they said so and they want a thing. That's not giving in to the terrible twos temper tantrum.
Yeah, I really honestly appreciate his approach, being science-based, having a rubric that's published and saying, this is what we're going to do. Anybody can go look at the numbers. Anybody can go look at the conditions. And if the conditions are right, we will move from phase 1 to phase 2. Not because of some political, will or whatever. It's not because somebody got angry and had a protest. It's going to be because science says this is a safe and prudent course of action.
So we get that in North Carolina because we were either lucky enough or prescient enough to have elected a Democrat.
Because of 385 voters in Durham, I think. There was some very small number of voters in Durham that flipped the county.
Yeah, and had McCrory won, was McCrory running against him? I guess, running for another term, or as has happened in a bunch of other states, Georgia being the nearest one, I guess, with Republican governor opening back up now.
Did you see what the Atlanta mayor did, though?
I missed that.
She said, nope.
So she can put her foot down. Now, is that one of those states where the state is trying to override stricter local regulations?
Nope. No, it's not. Thank God.
Okay.
But she was willing to fight it if it became that way. And there were all these memes going around where it's like, where Georgia says, Daddy says we can open back up again. And then there's just a picture of the mayor of Georgia and it says, what's your mama say?
That's good, but
I missed that one. I like that.
Yeah, but other parts of Georgia are going to open back up, and that could have been us, and it is other states. So Then you got the mayor of Las Vegas going, let's make us the petri dish. We'll be the experiment for the country. We'll see what happens.
Oh, Lord have mercy.
With an awesome interview again with Anderson Cooper. I hope you see it.
Lord have mercy.
Well, I find it interesting that like North Carolina has hotels are still open, limited basis, those kinds of things. In Nevada, it's all closed. It's all completely shut down. And that alone has a different set of impacts on the state of Nevada and in particular the city of Las Vegas and how they operate and everything else that happens there. And again, it's a policy decision. I am very much in favor of keeping people from getting infected, from keeping people from getting sick and dying, keeping everything else, that chain of events from happening. But it's interesting to see how the different parts of the country handle and approach the different pieces of this.
And we won't know the actual impact of that for a couple of weeks.
And that's
when we see cases start to either multiply or not. If they don't, those guys were right. And if they do, then there's little satisfaction in proving them wrong and having people get sick and die.
Yeah.
So what I'm maybe worried, paranoid, concerned about is that last Tuesday and this coming Tuesday, these guys will be out there marching. They'll get the TV coverage. And those of us that are saying they're risking our state for their fear, well, for their benefit, but they're getting all the publicity. Jen, you're saying
Why? Why are they getting all the publicity? What editorial decision is going on in those newsrooms that are making them get any publicity? I mean, they should get at most a half second with no video. Well, I don't know, do a video because it shows how they're standing too close to each other without masks. But they should get a half second remark on the evening news, and that's it. Because proportionally, that's how that's their population versus the population of the state.
But the rest of us are not out there with a physical presence.
No, and we don't need to be. I mean, there's
apparently we do because
200 of them last week. How many people are in this state? Like 200 out of 400,000 people in the state does not deserve an entire story.
Yeah, I've seen an estimate of a peak of 1,000, but even so, but yet they led every newscast at noon and at 6 o'clock and at 11 o'clock, and they were still on in the morning. And they got a couple of days of coverage. They big pictures in the News and Observer.
So clearly, what we need to do is we need to create a better story that the news is more intrigued by.
And can we do that without going out?
Yeah, we've got the brain trust to put together an excellently produced YouTube video we could send to the news that they could air in place. We can do press releases. We can do all sorts of events. Hey, we can donate a crap ton of money and get a whole news story on us for donating a crap ton of money toward the food bank.
I tried to convince the folks at Tuesdays with TTS that they had a good counter argument, and I thought it would get some traction, but it wasn't going to get traction with just a few of us were telling the TV station about it. Tuesdays with TTS for 162 or 3 weeks has had anywhere between 25 and a couple of hundred people marching around the federal building in Raleigh on New Bern Avenue every Tuesday at 11:30. And they immediately stopped doing that and went online on the Zoom conference because that was the right thing to do. That's a good counterpoint, and that point never made the TV.
I mean, from what I've heard, the news media is stretched thin. Reporters are being asked to do far more than they've ever had to do before because the money is just not there. So I think that they would benefit from a pre-written story that they can just make some quick edits on.
They get those all the time, and they use them, unfortunately, from businesses
well,
and stuff.
So why aren't we pre-writing a story, our side?
Nobody's asked me to, and I got the technology.
See, there you go. Now you have a project.
Yeah.
Yeah, McClatchy has filed bankruptcy. It is a bleak landscape for news organizations these days. If you're not catering to infotainment or just pure education or pure entertainment, it's really ugly financially. Yeah. And anytime you get anywhere close to journalistic integrity, you have a large group of people in this country who start screaming at you about fake news and whatever else. So, and they have They've got enough people to. They've got enough people call and have advertisers boycott programs and those kinds of things, and we have to either organize and do the reverse of that, or find other outlets to get attention.
I think the TV stations are doing okay now. With the loss of advertising because of coronavirus, their bottom line may be being affected, but they're not in the same straits that the newspapers are.
But I don't see why we can't lean into the fact that people think that the news is being already pressured by outside groups by not pressuring the news as an outside group.
Well,
I mean, if the news is already getting the crap for it, they might as well get the crap for something that's actually happening, right?
I'll be curious to see this Tuesday if the Open NC folks get the same kind of coverage they got last time. And if the state and the city and the county don't say, well, wait a minute, no one has said that you're essential yet. So,
or the last time you got a permit to march, you guys didn't follow health code, whatever. And so this time we're not granting the permit.
I would just like to see the story be, hey, they had these points, but they didn't follow, best practices. I imagine a story that went, hey, the Reopen NC folks were out saying that we could responsibly reopen because they could be responsible about social distancing, but we counted 3 out of the entire population of people that were there who were properly socially distancing when we were there.
Yeah, and their leader has been quoted in the news as saying that she could not control outside people or her own people. So
no, nobody can. That's normal.
Yeah, so let's see what happens. I will predict that they will go off as usual with no pushback from the state, county, or city. And they'll just get to do their thing again. And it may be bigger. I don't know. We'll see. Their Facebook page is invisible to us, so I can't see what kind of recruiting they're doing, but we will see. Jen, you had discovered something about Reopen that was funny?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Okay. So years and years ago, Campbell's Soup ran a series of commercials that had a same-sex couple, 2 dads, and they were making soup and serving soup. And a whole bunch of people took issue with that. And they started posting on social media about how Campbell's Soup had lost its way. And all of a sudden, this Campbell's Soup account showed up to respond to them, telling them that Campbell's Soup was warm, unlike these people's hearts, which seemed very bold for a customer service and a brand. But I kind of liked it because it was kind of on the nose. And it turns out that the person behind that is behind a group called, or a page called Hope This Helps. And he makes a point of impersonating brands or causes, or, he has been posting as measles and coronavirus in various social medias. And this is how he operates, and he does his comedy, and he is supported by patrons with patreon.com. And he has most recently been impersonating Reopen NC. And he is on the Reopen NC group, posting indistinguishably as Reopen NC. He has impersonated and duplicated their account, including the image and the name. And so if somebody were to click on it, that they would think that it was the official Reopen NC, but it is not. It is him. And you can tell because it is distinguishable by the level of pithy, on-the-nose self-awareness shown by the posts and comments that he makes. So don't believe everything you see. If something seems reasonable or self-aware, that's probably him trolling them. And you can see some of the screenshots of some of the work that he has done over at his Facebook page for Hope This Helps.
Yeah, so go there. I'll put a link on the Triangle Talk Show website, but just go to Facebook and type in Hope This Helps. And the first link that I came up to was, I think, the right one.
Yep, the very first thing that comes up, yep. And it's fake accounts. That's exactly it that is showing on the screen right now. It is parody, it is comedy, and it is run by a comedian whose name I'm not going to give because we're not here to dox people. But yeah, and if you like what he does, support him.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's good. There's some trolling, but I'm not sure how effective that is in countering them. I don't think they're one of those isolated, insular, because he's probably not in their group, or do you think he's...
He is in their group.
Okay, and they haven't figured him out yet to boot him out, because they boot people out like crazy.
Nope, they haven't figured him out. He is posting as the group's official page, and he is swaying people slowly but surely. He's also posting as some pastors who would have led their flocks into public health emergencies, encouraging the parishioners of the church to continue to take their medicine and continue to social distance and all sorts of it. He's trolling for good.
And comedy over the years has definitely been one of the best avenues for political message carrying, because people remember jokes. You remember things that make you laugh. So it's one of the better and more appealing ways for people to get messages like this across.
Yeah. One of the things that I've seen lately is, the past couple of years, is that people are saying that organizations like The Onion and parody groups are having a hard time because the real news, the real reality is so outrageous that you can't make that much fun of it.
That's why Jon Stewart retired.
There's a subreddit called Not the Onion, and it posts stories that if you read the headline, it's like, this has to be an Onion article, and no, it's not. That's a real headline with a real story behind. Oh.
Yeah.
President of U.S. encourages injecting Lysol into veins.
Now, come on. He didn't encourage that. He asked the distinguished scientist sitting next to him at the news conference if that's something that they would want to investigate. I think
he said he thought it was a good idea.
I think that, yeah.
And I watched him. It's like when you watch a fly circling around something rotting. He was circling around the idea of an antiviral. He was getting so close to the idea of a type of medicine known as an antiviral. And then at the very last minute, when he was about to land on that medicine, he did a hard swerve over into embalming fluid. Because embalming fluid is what happens when you put disinfectants in a human body.
Our president bothers me on many levels, but one of the big things is the people who support him say, "Oh, he was kidding. Oh, he was joking about something.
He was saying that.
He was exaggerating." But at some point,
why would a president, that's not a president's job. That is not what you want in a president. You want that in a comedian. You want that in a best friend. But in a president, you want somebody who is dry and serious all the time.
Because then you don't know what you can take seriously. You never have any sense of what policy should be. All you have is a failed, entertainment host who doesn't really have a good job doing that either. But sorry, that's veering back into politics.
That's what this show is all about. And there was a naughty word on the video, which I keep forgetting to mention to you guys. There's a button I can push when I'm sending the audio up to the website to be published, to distinguish whether an episode has naughty words in it. And the Triangle Talk Show can be explicit if we want to. You guys don't seem to have any trouble staying on the straight and narrow, and I pretty much don't. But if we want to say a bad word, we can. And there have been plenty of shows where people did. And not saying I encourage it or am asking for it, but if at any point you feel that you have to say, if you have to drop the F-bomb or something leaks out, don't worry about it. It's okay.
Good to know.
Yeah. So Jen is sitting there thinking, okay, what am I going to say first?
No, I like to keep my language PG or G-rated because I think that makes it more believable or listenable or have greater influence, because when people tend to start cursing, that tends to be polarizing. And you should be able to make your point without resorting to expletives.
Yeah. If that's all you hear, if you hear a lot of it, it loses its effect. But I'll listen to shows where they don't do that all the time, but every once in a while they drop one in, and then it's got some meaning again.
I mean, I'll do it. I'll call somebody like the world's greatest asshole in order to avoid getting a libel or a slander suit, because you can't sue for being called an asshole. But
I don't even think that requires me to push the explicit button. I think that's just speech these days.
Yeah, but that's why, what was it? Penn and Teller did a whole series of shows called Bullshit, and they used very explicit language because, as they pointed out in the very first episode, By doing that, they were making no claims that they could be sued over.
Interesting. And now I have to push the explicit button because you said bullshit. But
you said it.
Their show.
And I said it. Yeah, but I'm happy to. So speaking of bullshit, Breandan, you wanted to say something about the way Wake County schools are teaching your kids?
Yeah, so I've got 2 kids in public school. They're both in elementary school, and I have several friends who have kids in middle school and other grades. And I have generally been happy with the way the reopening of the educational system has gone so far, considering that much like my friend at LinkedIn, they went from we're closing all the schools and figuring it out. And at that point, I think they went to the teachers and said, we got to figure it out. And 10 days later, we had a basic plan. They went through it. They looked it over a couple of times. They made some modifications. We went for spring break, and we came back, and we've been doing school since then. And at least for us, it seems that the grades are getting together. So all of the 5th grade teachers got together and decided how they were going to, as a group, do instruction for the children. Now, I find it interesting that it appears to be left to the schools, and the schools are able to say, we're doing it as a school, we're doing it as a grade, we're doing it as individual teachers, because I have friends with kids who are in middle school, and they have a very different experience. I'm not going to reveal names, obviously, because that wouldn't be cool, but I get the sense that the teachers are doing an amazing job with almost no notice. And yes, if they had 6 months to figure out an online education plan, it would look very different from this. A lot of parents are complaining about the way instruction's happening and how much attention it needs from them to get their kids through school and things. But none of these are ideal situations. None of these conditions are ones that we would have chosen or done this way had we had any real option or time to plan or resources or anything. So I'm on the whole pleased with how things have gone despite the situation. I was not happy, but I completely expected and understood the fact that we're not going back to school this year. They announced end of last week that no public Wake County schools are not reopening this academic year. And they haven't said anything about the fall, but I would be surprised if things in this fall look the same as it did last fall, because just the realities of the science behind this virus. So I'm really hoping that we have the time to kind of review and think about, okay, what worked, what didn't work? How do we approach summer instruction? How do we approach, going back to school in August for traditional calendars, and kind of refine and go with this?
Yeah, it's a little bit like how they react to bad weather. And, sometimes they overreact and go too early. Sometimes they underreact and go too late. And in this case, they can't tell what the fall is going to be like. And they're not really predicting what they're going to do at that point. There's a little behind the curve because they can't tell where the curve is going to go.
Well, also, once you call school for weather or for coronavirus or a hurricane or whatever it is, you can't uncall it. You can't roll that back. So once you've said, we're out of school on Friday for a particular event, you can't then an hour later say, oh, just kidding, school's back on.
Yeah.
So they have to do it kind of once. And sometimes that means they make the call too late. And sometimes it means they make the call prematurely. But again, I get the sense that they are listening to the science and not just political or like personal pressure and political pressure. They're trying to figure out what they can do safely to keep the schools operating correctly. And then they're trying to figure out, okay, how do we maximize the instructional day? How do we maximize the content the kids are getting? Because that's important. But if we're exposing kids to the virus and they're bringing it home and causing more community spread, that's kind of that's the antithesis of what we're trying to do here.
Yeah. Last neighborhood show we did that you weren't able to be here for, a friend of mine, Shanna Broders, who is a Wake County elementary school teacher up in Wake Forest, was talking about how she was doing things. And what surprised me is she said that she doesn't do classroom type instruction online with just her and all the students. And it made sense the way she described it. They can't do that because any individual family may have 2 or 3 kids at different grade levels and not enough computer resources for them all to be in class at the same time. So the teacher will record their instruction, and the students can watch the instruction at their leisure, at their own time frame.
And that pedagogy has a name. If anybody wants to Google it, it's called the flipped classroom. Flipped classroom.
So the only thing that they did actually online was was a chance for students to ask questions, and that can be staggered throughout the day, depending on home student availability. So, Breandan, is that the way you're seeing things happen with your kids?
So for us, for elementary school, they're having not mandatory, strongly recommended everybody shows up at the same time for a group video chat in the morning at a particular time. And I think this functions primarily for elementary school because you have one kind of base homeroom teacher or one kind of base teacher, and then in the afternoons you'd switch to a different teacher. Whereas in middle school, you have a science teacher and a math teacher and a history teacher and other more differentiated teaching approaches that way. So for us, it gives us a sense of schedule and routine in the morning that the kids need to be on the video calls, and they're at the same time, which for some families that might be very difficult. We are fortunate enough to have spare older laptops that we can say, okay, well, this laptop's for you and you have headphones, and this one's for you and you have headphones, and that's fine. But my friends who have kids in middle school, the teachers don't seem to be coordinating office hours. So it's the teacher sets whatever hours works for them. And if your kid has conflicting office hours, overlapping office hours, and they need help from both sets of teachers, they have to choose. They don't have the sense to, or they don't have the ability to coordinate that. And that seems really hard. And that's one of those places where a better sense of coordination, I think, would be very valuable in trying to either coordinate across, say, all the science teachers in 7th grade in the county, or across, all the teachers in 7th grade in a particular school, to say, we're going to make sure that we provide either more hours or we stagger the hours or whatever it is to provide instruction that way. But I don't know. I'm not an expert in this. This is not a thing that I've studied in particular. I've done a lot of working remotely, but I've never tried to deliver content and educational material remotely on a consistent basis.
Does it look like they are open to revising how they're doing things, or are they locking themselves into plan A?
So far, they've been very adaptable. Like I said, the stuff before spring break looked one way, and the stuff after has looked a very different way. And it seems that they're modifying and slowly refining and understanding kind of how and the what of it. So honestly, I want them to keep changing it as they find things that work better, as they find techniques, or as they find different methods to try. Please go ahead and figure it out, especially now at the end of an academic year and not next year in the beginning of the academic year. Use now to figure out kind of what the best thing for both the teacher teams at the schools are to work together to deliver content, and what instructional things work best for the kids. Some kids have special needs in terms of learning. They have IEPs, or the gifted program kids have different academic needs. And how do you balance those things? And how do you reach out to the kids who may not have great technology access at home, or whatever the conditions are? And definitely be flexible is step zero in all of that.
Because it sounds like you're able to let your kids do something that most families can't do, which is have them all online on different classes at the same time.
Yeah. Well, even more ridiculousness is that my wife is a student at UNC, so she's on a computer. I'm on a computer working. My kids are each on their own computers. And I know that is not a common situation for folks. That is definitely a mark of privilege, and I appreciate that right now that I have that ability. But that doesn't work for everybody.
And that's what's going on right now. There's going to be students that can't do that. Yeah. So do you get the impression that they are in any way trying to make traditional school fit into an online architecture, or have they rewritten everything so that because the way the instruction is going on has to be done totally differently? Or can they work their way in that direction because you have to?
So I haven't seen much of what the inside of a classroom looks like for the kids the past couple of years. Kindergartners in first grade, you see a lot of the inner workings. There's a lot more, interest from the parents, unfortunately, and invitations from the teachers for people to come in and see the kind of the class. You're never discouraged from coming, but there's a lot more encouragement in the beginning. My oldest is in 5th grade, and I don't know what his instructional day looked like before all of this. And so I can't really do a fair comparison. I'm only looking at what I can see now of what he's doing and kind of what he remembers from before. And he's not the most reliable of narrators, unfortunately. But they're definitely hitting academic topics. It looks like they're trying to work through courses of study and sections. And again, I'm not privy to any kind of internal policy, but my guess is they're trying to say, we have gone over phases of matter. We have gone over life systems. We have gone over, and they're working down that list, trying to make sure that they can, at the end of the year, check the box and say, yes, we have delivered the academic content required to go from 4th grade to 5th grade or 5th grade to 6th grade.
Okay. And as I understand it, testing won't be done as it has been, at least not this year, and they're going to do kind of a pass-fail thing?
I had not dug into it that deeply, unfortunately. I've been trying to get my work stuff working, and so I feel like a negligent parent not having done more digging there.
Yeah, I'm just going off
the
news stories.
Teacher I know has said that nothing is certain until it's certain. So he's seen a lot of proposals, and a lot of them are, he thinks they're going to become the official word, but nothing is the official word. So that's one where there are no answers yet.
Okay.
And again, that kind of makes sense that you don't want to rush into any of these things, especially if 2 weeks from now things may be different and you may get different, guidance from the state level or from somebody else, and you need to wait until the last possible moment, unfortunately, to make the final decision. So,
all right.
They're talking about that some of the counter proposals I've seen. One was for predictive grades, which is what the UK is doing for its students, where you just take how the student has performed up until this point and just predict that would be their performance for the whole year and just slap a grade on it. One of them is for numerical only grades without a letter attached, which is silly because anybody who knows a grading scale can then attach a letter to that number. So it's kind of pointless. That's just window dressing and optics. And then there are a variety of other proposals. One of them is that, nothing that happened after March 15th counts. So it remains to be seen. I'm just glad I'm not the one who has to make the judgment call. This is a heavy, weighty judgment, and I'm really happy that somebody else gets stuck with the consequences of it.
Yeah, public policy is a hard field, and that you have decisions that shape people's lives, and the consequences are very real. So I thank the people who are doing that work and trying to figure out what the best course that they can see is out of all of this.
Yeah. And there's no win for them. They're going to catch crap no matter what they decide. So yeah. I think it's important that we be the voices of the anti-crap and make sure we get our thanks in there to them too, so that they have some break from the crap they're going to catch.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why I thought to bring Shanna on, because she had put on her Facebook page to give us a break before their first actual week. She said, things are not going to go as planned. They're not going to go as well as we want them to. So give us a break. So we're just about out of time. One last thing I wanted to get in here was that as I'm looking across the online environment, particularly the YouTube environment, there is just a phenomenal amount of creativity going on in people producing things that have related to the situation, the long national worldwide nightmare that we're all in right now. Just a tremendous amount of creativity has been unleashed, and some of it has happened here in the Triangle area. And I want to end with one thing I think I can get away with playing off of YouTube without getting a takedown notice. We'll find out. This is from a group up in Durham at a retirement community called Carolina Arbors. They've got a theater club up there, and they have produced a few things, and this is one news-ish story that they did, and we'll take a look.
Eyewitness
My
News.
name is Rona Corona with the Carolina Arbors Gazette, the roving reporter reporter for covering this great community. You know, we're in this time of the coronavirus, so we obviously have talked a lot about social distancing. So I know the dog park is a place where people might not do their distancing. So let's see if we can talk to someone here about that. Oh, sir.
Yes.
Sir. Oh, please stand back. We're talking about social distancing.
Yes.
And just wanted to get your opinion on that. And how is it working here at the dog park?
Oh, it's so stressful. First, I was told we could have 10 people here. Then I said 5. Then they said had to be 6 feet apart. Then they said you had to be 10 feet apart. And I don't know, I was very stressed. It's just too many rules and regulations. I mean, earlier there were 4 of us here, and there were 4 dogs. Is that 8? I just don't understand. I don't even know how many cars I can have on my driveway.
Okay, and that's what's a wrap, folks, for social distancing at the dog park. Check back at 11 for more breaking news.
Stand by. Going live in 3.
Oh, we got bloopers.
1.
I relate to that so much.
Oh, this is Rona Corona from the California. I told you I can't do it again. Yes.
Is that a microphone?
It's a microphone.
Oh, can I do something?
Don't do that.
Don't do that to
Now
microphones.
they're saying, no, I'm sorry. And I f***ed up this again.
We
Button.
learned so much here at the dog park from this resident. Check us back. Check back.
Buttons.
So we hope.
Yes.
Come on.
Okay. Is that a microphone?
It's a microphone. So, sir, how has social distancing worked out for you here at the park? Are you practicing it?
Oh, yes, but it's very stressful. I get so confused. They change things all the time. At first, they told us we could be in a group of 5, 10, and
I'm going to beat you.
I think they're done. I think.
Yep. So you won't get a takedown notice if we are using it for as an opportunity for critique, because then that counts as fair use.
Yes, I guess we. There's their credit.
So I would like to critique that, and I would like to critique it and say I love it.
Yes.
Yeah, I like the bloopers better than the actual story that they did. But I mean, comedy is hard. Local production is hard.
Acting is hard.
Yeah. I mean, I've been responsible for having my fingers in very professional stuff, and not all of that goes as well as you thought it would. So we'll give them props. It's the Carolina Arbors Theater Club. Rona Corona at the dog park was what that was called. I'll put a link in the Triangle Talk Show website, triangletalkshow.com, if you want to go see that. They got like 6 or 7 different things up there now, and probably continuing unless they've given up. I hope they haven't given up. So that's all I got. You guys got anything burning that you need to toss out there to the vast audience?
Not really, other than stop focusing on the number of infections or deaths. That's not the point. The real number, if you want a number to focus on, is the number of tests we're doing, because that's what gives you a better sense of how much we know. And if we tested one person, if we had one test and we tested one person and they were sick, that'd be 100% test rate, or sickness rate. We need to be testing everybody. So stop obsessing over kind of the infection rate. We're not testing everybody. We can't yet. Obsess over how many tests we've performed and how widespread that has been and the rigor of that.
Yeah, and the news bugs me when they get all serious and talk about the death rate, because it's a minimum of a week lagging indicator, and it's going to keep going up even when everything else is going down. So
My closing thoughts are that mortality and morbidity are 2 very different M words. I know they sound the same, but they're not. Morbidity has to do with sick. Morbidity is how many people get sick, and mortality is how many people die. And I've seen people confusing them because, if you're not familiar with the words, they sound close enough and they're spelled close enough. And I can understand why you'd think they're synonyms, but they are definitely not.
All right. So speaking of spelling, Brendan, I spelled your name wrong here. You're now Brendan Devendorf, apparently. And I think, Jen, I got, your name is still correct. and Nanny Jen, and my name. I keep forgetting to change the little thing at the bottom where a little bit of information is left over from 3 shows ago.
Maybe? Oh.
It's left over
Somebody
like
voted in the Republican primary then.
yeah. That I actually have done that because
I did.
Yeah, I'm registered unaffiliated, so in a primary I can take either one. But that's a couple shows ago, and I keep forgetting to change it. I don't know what I thought of putting there this time. Think of something clever, and yeah, that's what I would have put in the in my little title thing. And those of you that are listening, you don't need to know any of that at all.
It says Republican maybe.
Yeah. So this has been episode 86. I thought it was going to be random. I think it turned out to be April 26, 2020. The Terrible Twos, which, by the way, is probably not supposed to be an apostrophe S because that's possessive. But
Greengrocer's apostrophe you've done.
Okay, yeah, but TWOS would look like a different word. So I'm not sure how you refer to the Terrible Twos. But that's what we're in now as the Triangle Talk Show. We are now going into our Terrible Twos, having gone by our 2nd anniversary. So it's all downhill from here. Thank you guys for being here. And if you want to play next week, I think we're going to do another show next Sunday afternoon about 4 o'clock. So, Jen, your picture never reappeared.
I know, it's great. The camera loves the fact that I haven't had a chance to dye my hair and is kindly saving me from public embarrassment.
But we'll try to get that fixed by next week, and we'll see a new story of Roots.
And the camera's doing me no favors at all by actually working.
Yeah, neither one of us we're both designed for radio.
Oh yeah.
The only reason this is a TV show is I had all this equipment already. If I didn't have it, I wouldn't be going out to buy it. Yeah, microphones and an audio mixer are all you need. So that's it. Thank you everybody for watching or listening or whatever you're doing. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube page. Speaking of video, just so I can get up to 100 and get my custom URL, and then you never have to watch us again. All right, that's it for this episode of the Triangle Talk Show. Everybody, over and
out.
Breandan, you're a little late on the uptake.
Sorry.
And
he wasn't sure he was supposed to speak.
Yeah, I know. And now we have to just wait a little while because when I push the button to close things on YouTube and on Facebook, it stops things early. And so I don't want it to stop the real end of the show. It's